The morning wind rolled across the high plains like a restless ghost, stirring the dust that clung to the dying grass. Elias Ward pulled on the reins, the creak of leather and the snort of his horse breaking the silence. He had been riding since dawn, chasing the thin trail that led toward his uncle's old cabin, the only inheritance left to his name after the war, and too many dead friends. He thought the place would be quiet. He thought it would give him peace. But peace was a word the West rarely kept its promise on. As he crested the last ridge, the world seemed to stop breathing. There in front of the weather-beaten cabin hung 5 women suspended from a wooden gate like grim warnings carved by hell itself. Their bodies swayed gently in the cold wind, bare feet brushing the dirt. Torn dresses fluttered against rope-bitten skin. Crows perched nearby, silent for once, as if even they respected the horror before them. Pinned to each woman's chest was a slab of wood. Burned into it were the words, "What belongs to Morrison stays with Morrison." Elias froze. His throat dried up, his heart hammering against his ribs. Morrison. The name hit him like a nail to the skull. The judge who ruled half the territory, with his pocket full of lawmen and his other hand in the blood trade. Elias dismounted slowly. His boots sank into the frost-hardened ground, the air so cold it cut through his coat. He wanted to turn away, but something, some flicker of humanity left inside him, kept his eyes fixed on the rope marks and the bruised faces. Then a tremor. A finger twitched. A chest rose shallowly. One of them was still breathing. Then another. "Dear God," he whispered. Without another thought, Elias pulled the knife from his belt. The metal gleamed dull silver in the gray light as he reached up and cut the first rope. The woman's body dropped limply into his arms, her neck marked deep red from the noose. He felt the faint beat of a pulse, weak but there. He worked fast, slicing each rope one by one. Bodies collapsed into his arms, heavy and half-frozen. By the time he was done, 5 women lay before the gate, their skin pale, their lips cracked and blue, their wrists bound tight with rough hemp. He dragged them beneath the porch into the cabin that smelled of dust and long-dead firewood. The place hadn't seen a soul in years. A broken chair leaned against the wall. The floor was thick with grime. But there was room for the living and the dying. Elias lit a fire with shaking hands, the match hissing to life. Orange light filled the cabin, casting long shadows across the walls. The warmth spread slowly, crawling toward the women's faces. He looked at them one by one. The first, dark hair, tangled with dirt and blood, her eyes half open even in delirium. The mark of strength lingered in her jawline, the stubborn set of a fighter. The second, hair like fire, a slash of defiance even in pain. The third, younger, golden-haired, lips trembling as she breathed, the innocence of someone who had no business on a noose. The fourth, quiet eyes, nearly black, watching the fire as if it might tell her the future. And the last, older, silver-streaked, her face lined with both pain and grace, the calm gravity of a mother holding the world together. Elias crouched beside them, slicing away the ropes at their wrists. The fibers tore loose with a dry hiss. He saw bruises in places no one should bear them. Whoever did this hadn't just meant to kill, they meant to send a message. He poured water from his canteen, trickling it gently into the mouth of the first woman. Her throat moved, swallowing. She coughed, then gasped for air, her body shivering. When she finally spoke, her voice was like gravel and fire mixed together. "Don't leave us behind." Elias froze. She wasn't begging, she was commanding. He steadied her head with his hand. "You're safe now. You're still breathing." Her cracked lips curved into something between a smile and a snarl. "Safe?" she rasped. "No one's safe on Morrison's land." Her words carried the weight of a curse. Behind them, another groan sounded. The red-haired woman stirred, dragging herself upright, eyes blazing. "If you have sense, stranger, you'll ride out of here before sundown. You cut those ropes, means you just signed your death." Elias looked at her, then at the others, all awake now, watching him with wary, exhausted eyes. He felt the fire's warmth on his face, the tremor in his hands. His voice came out low but steady. "I'm not leaving," he said. "If I ride away now, what does that make me?" Silence, only the pop and hiss of fire. Then the dark-haired one spoke again, her voice quiet, carrying something old and sacred in it. "You are not from here," she said. "You don't know what this land remembers." Elias frowned. I don't need to. I just know what's right. She studied him, eyes glinting like embers beneath the soot. What's right, she said slowly, is what men like Morrison killed to bury. Elias didn't understand, but he could feel it. The weight of centuries hung in her tone. These women weren't simple victims. They were survivors of something ancient and forbidden. The air itself seemed to tremble with the spirits that clung to them. He added another log to the fire. Sparks rose up, flickering between them like lost souls. Finally, the older woman, the one with the calm eyes, spoke softly. Names. You should know our names before you risk your life. She pointed to each in turn, her voice slow, deliberate. Kaya, the elder. Tyan, the red-haired warrior. Chinoa, the golden one. Aelin, the quiet one with the dark eyes. And her, she nodded toward the dark-haired leader. That's Nashdo-Iba. Elias nodded, his name sounding dull in comparison. Elias Ward, he said, and I reckon I've just made myself a target. Kaya's eyes softened, a trace of pity crossing her face. You have, but maybe the mountain chose you. The mountain? Elias asked. Aelin reached into a pouch tied at her waist and pulled out a small stone, smooth and painted with a crimson spiral. The mountain of fire, she whispered. Our sacred place. Morrison's men dug into it, chasing gold. When we tried to stop them, they called us witches, said we carried a curse. Tyan laughed bitterly. They were right about one thing. We do carry something. Truth. Nashdoiba met Elias's gaze. Her eyes were fierce even through exhaustion. They hanged us for what we refused to tell. The map, the vein of gold buried beneath the bones of our ancestors. They wanted it all. Elias felt the cold crawl up his spine. And now? Now, she said, they'll come back to finish the job. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the distant echo of thunder, or maybe hooves. Elias's horse whinnied nervously. He gripped his rifle, his instincts screaming that he had just crossed a line he could never uncross. He turned toward Nashdoiba. If I help you, if I stay, what happens then? She looked at him for a long time before answering. Her voice was a whisper wrapped in steel. Then the land will remember your name too. The fire crackled louder, filling the silence that followed. Smoke curled toward the roof beams like prayers rising to forgotten gods. Elias looked at the 5 women, battered, broken, yet burning with a kind of strength he hadn't seen since the war. And for the first time in a long while, he felt something stir inside him that wasn't anger or grief. It was purpose. He sat down beside the fire, rifle across his knees, eyes on the door. Outside, the mountain wind screamed again, but beneath it, faint and eerie, came the sound of drums. Slow, distant, the heartbeat of the land itself. And Elias understood. The West didn't give second chances, but sometimes it demanded them. The morning crept in slow and pale, the kind of light that made everything look older than it was. Smoke drifted lazily from the fireplace, curling through the cracks in the cabin's roof. Outside, the wind had quieted, but the stillness carried weight, like the land itself was listening. Elias Ward sat by the fire, boots planted on the rough-hewn floor, rifle across his lap. The 5 women still lay close to the hearth, wrapped in blankets he'd found stuffed in an old trunk. Their breathing had grown steadier through the night, though none of them had slept much. Every few minutes one would startle awake, eyes wild, as if pulled back from some nightmare that refused to let go. Elias poured hot water into a dented tin cup and passed it to Kaya, the eldest. Her hands trembled as she accepted it, but her gaze held steady, calm, weathered, the kind of look only a lifetime of storms could carve. Thank you, she murmured. Elias nodded. You don't owe me thanks, ma'am. She studied him for a long beat. Maybe not, she said softly, but you should know what you stepped into. Behind her, the others stirred. Tyen, the fiery-haired fighter, pushed herself upright and wrapped a tattered blanket tighter around her shoulders. He already knows, she muttered. He just doesn't believe it yet. Elias looked up. Knows what? Aelin answered this time, the quiet one with eyes that seemed to hold the color of the earth after rain. She reached into the small leather pouch tied at her belt and drew out the same smooth stone she'd shown him the night before. The red spiral painted on its surface caught the light of the fire. This, she said, is from the Mountain of Fire. Our home. Our ancestors buried more than bones there. They buried stories, songs, and gold. Morrison found the gold. He called it a miracle. We called it theft. Elias leaned forward. Gold? The word carried both temptation and dread. He'd seen too many men lose their souls to that shine. Nashdoiba, the dark-haired leader, spoke then, her voice raw but steady. It isn't about the gold. It's what it sits on. The mountain is sacred. Every spring, our people would go there to pray for the rains. Morrison sent men to dig it apart. When we tried to stop them, he called us criminals, said we were hiding treasure meant for the white towns. Tyan spat into the ashes. He paid his deputies with that same gold, bought himself a judge's robe to make his theft look holy. Elias's jaw tightened. He'd seen that kind of power before. Men who twisted the law to fit their hunger. And the hanging, he asked quietly? Chenoa, the youngest, stared at the fire, her small hands clutching the edges of her blanket. They said we carried disease, that we'd cursed their mine. They killed our brothers, burned our camp, and hanged us to make an example. Her voice trembled, then broke. They left us for the coyotes. Silence filled the room, thick as smoke. Elias stared into the flames, the fire popping like distant gunshots. He thought of the war, of the faces he couldn't save. And now here were 5 more ghosts who refused to die. Kaya's voice pulled him back. You ask why we still breathe. It's because the mountain doesn't forget. Its wind keeps us alive until our story's told. Elias looked up at her, the words settling deep in his chest. He wasn't a man for spirits or legends, but something about the way the wind moaned through the boards made him wonder if maybe the land did remember. Outside, a crow cried once, sharp and lonely. Tyan moved closer to the door, peering through a crack in the wall. They'll come back, she said. Morrison won't leave a message unfinished. Elias rose, the floor creaking beneath his boots. Let him come, he said, loading a round into the Winchester. If he wants this land, he'll have to take it from me. Nashdoiba's eyes flashed. You think it's that simple? You cut us down, and now the mountain binds you too. When blood spills again, it'll call your name along with ours. He met her gaze unflinching. Then let it call. I'm not the kind of man who leaves the wounded behind. For the first time, she almost smiled. It wasn't soft. It was the kind of smile that carried respect. Kaya spoke again, quieter this time. We'll need more than bullets. Morrison owns the sheriff, the judge, half the men between here and the river. But he fears one thing, truth. She nodded toward Aelin. Show him. Aelin hesitated, then untied another leather pouch, this one sealed with a strip of sinew. She emptied it onto the table, folded papers, broken wax seals, a handful of tarnished coins, and a ring engraved with an eagle clutching scales. Elias reached out carefully. What am I looking at? Proof, Aelin said. Debt contracts, fake signatures, maps he forged to steal land from every tribe between the San Pedro and the Rio Grande. That ring, he took it from a marshal he had murdered 2 winters ago. Elias exhaled slowly. You've been carrying this? Aelin nodded. He thought hanging us would bury it with us. He was wrong. Tyan gave a bitter laugh. Seems he didn't plan on a stubborn rancher with a sharp knife. Elias half smiled, though his eyes stayed hard. Yeah, well, I've done dumber things. The women exchanged glances. For a moment, the weight in the room lifted. Just enough to breathe. Chenoa leaned forward, her tone softer. You said this land was your uncle's. Jeremiah Ward, yes? Elias looked at her sharply. How do you know that? Because he was one of the few men who helped us, Kaya said. Before he died, he hid us food, warned us about Morrison's men. He told us he was leaving the land to family, said maybe blood could fix what blood broke. Elias felt the world tilt a little. His uncle, quiet, stubborn old Jeremiah, had always said the land carried ghosts. Maybe he'd meant it. The fire crackled louder, spitting sparks that danced between them like living things. Then Nashdoiba's tone hardened. You need to decide, rancher. You can ride out now and live, or stay and be hunted with us. Elias didn't answer right away. He looked around at the cabin, the broken chair, the dusty shelves, the blood-stained ropes piled in a corner. Outside the window, the sun had risen just enough to paint the world in gold and rust. He thought of all the men who'd taken what they wanted and called it progress, of the graves left behind by their justice. Then he looked back at the 5 women, bruised but unbroken, eyes full of the same defiance he'd once seen in his own reflection. I already made my choice, he said finally. Last night, when I cut those ropes, Nashtuba studied him, the firelight catching the green flecks in her dark eyes. Then may the mountain guard you, she whispered. They spent the rest of the morning tending to wounds and cleaning rifles. Elias found a half-empty box of ammunition in his uncle's trunk, along with an old Navy Colt and a rusted Bowie knife. He passed them around, each woman taking the weapon with reverence, as though accepting an oath. Kaya gathered sage from a pouch and began to burn it near the doorway. The smell filled the cabin, sharp and clean. She murmured prayers in a language older than any map. Elias didn't understand a word, but he felt it. Something deep and grounding, like the land breathing through her. By afternoon, the air outside had turned heavy. The sky pressed low, the kind of sky that promised a storm, or worse. Far off beyond the ridge came the faint rhythm of hooves. Aylin looked up, eyes narrowing. They're coming! Elias stepped onto the porch, squinting into the distance. The horizon shimmered with heat, but behind it moved dark shapes. Riders, slow but certain. He gripped the rifle tighter. Nashtoiba joined him, standing shoulder to shoulder. You could still run, she said. He shook his head. I've run enough in my life. She turned to him then, her voice low, almost kind. Then you stand with us. And when the mountain remembers, it will remember your courage. Elias nodded once. Then we'd better give it something worth remembering. The first thunder rolled over the hills, echoing like cannon fire. Inside the cabin, the fire dimmed, leaving only the glow of embers, small, stubborn lights that refused to die. 5 women and 1 man waited in silence, listening to the hoofbeats growing louder, closer, inevitable. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and dust and blood yet to be spilled. The storm had found them, and this time, Elias Ward didn't plan on hiding from it. By late afternoon, the sky had turned the color of gunmetal. The air hung thick, heavy with dust and the promise of violence. The wind carried the dry scent of sagebrush and fear. Elias Ward stood on the porch, Winchester in hand, watching the horizon. The riders were closer now, small, dark shapes moving across the ridge like ants crawling over bone. He counted at least 15, maybe 20. Too many. Inside the cabin, the fire had gone out, replaced by the sharp smell of gun oil and sweat. The 5 women were preparing in silence. No one needed to say what was coming. Kaya tied her long gray hair back and murmured a prayer under her breath, her voice low and steady, like the hum of the earth itself. Tyan checked the chamber of a pistol Elias had given her, spinning it once before snapping it shut. Chinoa folded a bandage from torn cloth. Aylin carefully unrolled a map drawn on animal hide, marking lines with her finger. And Nashtoiba, always composed, always fierce, stood by the window, her face still bruised from the noose, but her eyes sharper than any blade. When she saw Elias step back inside, she didn't ask what he'd seen. She already knew. They'll reach us before sundown, he said. You've all been through hell already. If anyone wants to ride out, Tyan cut him off with a snort. Ride out to what? We're done running. Kaya looked up from her prayer. The mountain doesn't give second chances, Elias Ward. It gives tests. He gave a humorless half smile. Guess I'm about to find out how I score. She didn't smile back. You'll be judged by what you stand for, not how straight you shoot. He nodded, then began checking the rifle's action, his hands steady though his chest felt like a drum. Outside, thunder rolled, far but closing in, like hoofbeats from the heavens. They fortified the cabin as best they could, windows barricaded with furniture, loose floorboards pried up to make room for ammunition and knives. Elias found a rusted axe by the barn and drove it into the doorframe for quick reach. The old place creaked like it resented being dragged back into another war. By twilight, the ridge had come alive. Morrison's riders appeared like black smoke spilling from the hills. They moved slow, confident, torches in hand. Elias could see the man himself at the center, tall, broad, his black coat snapping in the wind. Even from a distance, Morrison radiated authority, the kind that didn't need to shout, the kind that came from knowing the law belonged to whoever held the gun and the gold. Elias's stomach turned. He'd known men like that his whole life. Inside, Chinoa whispered, "Is it him?" "It's him," Elias said quietly, "and he's brought company." Aylin stepped closer to the window, her eyes narrowing. "We can't let them circle us. Once the fire starts, there's no way out." Nashtoiba walked toward the door, her posture unflinching. "Then we make our stand here." Elias reached for her arm. You step outside that door. They'll shoot before you can say your name. She looked at his hand, then up into his eyes. You think I'm scared of dying? My people already did. I'm just making sure the land remembers why. He didn't have an answer for that, only respect. When Morrison's men were close enough for the torchlight to dance across their faces, the judge called out, his voice rolling through the valley like thunder. Ward, I know you're in there, boy. He paused, waiting for the echo to fade. You've got something that belongs to me. 5 of them, to be exact. Elias stepped to the door but didn't open it. His voice came low and sharp through the wood. They don't belong to anyone. Laughter rippled through the riders, cruel and hollow. Morrison's voice came again, colder. That land you're standing on was mine before you showed your sorry face. You cut those ropes, you signed their death warrants, and yours too. Inside the cabin, the women stood silent. The air grew thick with the smell of fear and gunpowder. Elias took a breath. Then come take it. Outside, a few of the men shifted in their saddles. They hadn't expected defiance. Morrison spat into the dirt, then motioned with his hand. The riders began to spread out, forming a half circle around the cabin. Aylin's voice was barely a whisper. They're going to burn us out. Elias nodded grimly. Not if we burn first. He turned to the women. You all know this land better than I do. Any way out? A path? A creek bed? Something? Kaya shook her head. There's nowhere to run, but there's power in the ground beneath us. It remembers every drop of blood spilled here. He hesitated. Power won't stop bullets. Nastoiba met his gaze. Maybe not, but it might remind the land whose side it's on. She knelt by the door, drawing symbols in ash along the threshold. Her fingers moved fast, sure. Tyan stood behind her, reloading the Colt. The click of metal and the whisper of prayer blended into a single rhythm. When the first gunshot cracked through the dusk, Elias's instincts took over. He dropped low, rifle aimed through the gap in the boards. A rider fell from his horse, his torch hitting the ground and flaring in the dust. The others shouted, returning fire. Bullets punched through the walls, splinters flying like wasps. Chenoa ducked behind a table, eyes wide, breath fast. Tyan crouched beside her, firing back through a shattered window. Stay low, girl, she barked. Aylin lit a small jar of oil, her hands steady as she rolled it across the floor toward the door. Elias kicked it open, sending the jar flying into the night. It burst in a blossom of fire, scattering the front line of riders. Horses screamed, men cursed. Smoke filled the air. Flames licked the dirt. For a moment it looked like they might hold. Then Morrison's voice thundered again. Burn them out! More torches flew. The dry grass caught fast. Orange tongues racing toward the porch. The heat hit the cabin like a furnace. Kaya rose, her silhouette glowing against the firelight. She lifted her hands chanting in Apache, her voice fierce and rising. Nahas zan shil be hozin. The earth knows me. The others joined her. The chant rolled like thunder. Elias didn't understand the words, but he felt the ground tremble faintly beneath his boots. He fired again, another man down. Tyan hit one trying to flank them. Chenoa tossed a bucket of water over the nearest flames. The cabin became a storm of smoke, bullets and voices crying to gods that might or might not still be listening. In the chaos, Nashtoiba grabbed Elias's arm, dragging him toward the back wall. There's a crawl space behind the barrels. It leads under the hill. Jeremiah built it during the war. He stared at her, surprised. You knew my uncle's secret tunnel? She smirked. Your uncle wasn't very good at keeping secrets. They cleared the barrels just as another round of gunfire shattered the windows. Chenoa screamed, clutching her shoulder. Kaya pulled her to the floor, pressing a cloth against the wound. Blood soaked through instantly. Elias wanted to help, but Morrison's men were closing in. Through the haze, he could see their torches swaying closer, wolves circling the last bit of light. He chambered one more round. We can't hold this forever. Nashtoiba's voice was calm, almost serene. We don't need forever. Just long enough for the storm to break. Lightning tore across the sky, followed by thunder that shook the valley. A sudden downpour hit, slamming against the flames and smothering the worst of them. The smell of rain and gunpowder filled the air. Morrison cursed from the field. Keep shooting! Don't let them crawl out! But the fire was dying, smoke turning to steam. Elias took the moment to drag Chenoa toward the tunnel entrance. The others followed, weapons still in hand. They slipped into the darkness beneath the cabin. the sound of rain hammering the earth above them. The tunnel was narrow, damp, the smell of dirt strong and alive. Kaya whispered, "The mountain protects its own." When they emerged on the far side of the hill, the storm was in full rage. Lightning lit the world in flashes of white and gold. Behind them, the cabin burned slow and stubborn, refusing to surrender even in ruin. Elias turned to Nashdoiba, water streaming down his face. "You think he'll stop now?" She shook her head. "No, Morrison never stops. But neither do we." He looked back at the fire, the silhouettes of riders fading into smoke. "Then tomorrow," he said quietly, "we make this right." The thunder cracked again, louder this time, rolling down the mountains like a war drum. The storm had gathered, and it was far from over. The rain lasted through the night. By dawn, the air was sharp with smoke and wet ash. The cabin on the ridge still smoldered, a black scar against the gray sky. Elias Ward stood at the mouth of the hidden tunnel, his coat soaked, the Winchester heavy in his hands. Behind him, the 5 women climbed out one by one, exhausted but alive. For a long while, no one spoke. The world around them was quiet, too quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Nashdoiba broke the silence. "He'll come again." Her voice was low, certain. Elias nodded. "Yeah, he's not the kind to take a loss." Kaya knelt in the mud, pressing her palm to the earth. She whispered something in Apache, then looked up. "The ground still burns beneath. The spirits haven't gone." Elias looked out toward the horizon. Through the mist, faint trails of smoke rose from the valley, Morrison's men regrouping. He could almost hear the faint clang of horseshoes, the echoes of revenge building. "We can't keep running," Tan said. "If we want to live, we take the fight to him." Elias studied her face. The rope marks on her neck were fading, but the fire in her eyes burned brighter than ever. "We'll need more than courage," he said. "We'll need a plan." They moved through the hills that morning, following Kaya's lead. She knew the land like she'd grown from it. The others followed silently, their steps light, senses alert. By midday, they reached the edge of a canyon, narrow, deep, carved by a river that had long since dried up. The air smelled of copper and clay. Aylin knelt by the ledge and pointed. "There, Morrison's camp." Below, smoke curled from a cluster of tents and wagons. Men moved like shadows between the fires, cleaning guns, tightening saddles. At the center stood a large black horse, and Morrison beside it, his coat immaculate, his face calm as a preacher's. Nashdoiba's eyes narrowed. "He's waiting for us." Elias crouched beside her. "He thinks we're dead. That's our advantage." Tyan grinned. "Then let's make him regret being wrong." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Aylin and Chenoa gathered dry brush and pitch from the trees. Kaya carved symbols into stones, murmuring prayers to the wind. Elias checked and rechecked the rifle, cleaning the mud from the barrel. The women moved like ghosts, efficient, purposeful, bound by something stronger than fear. As twilight came, the wind shifted east, carrying the smell of the valley toward them. Elias felt the air tighten. "This is it," he said quietly. "Once we start, there's no going back." Nashdoiba met his gaze. There never was. They waited until the moon rose, half hidden behind thin clouds. The canyon glowed silver, the camp below flickering with firelight. Elias led them along the ridge, crouched low. Tyan carried a torch wrapped in cloth, its light smothered but ready. Kaya whispered a final blessing, "For the ones who died here and the ones still breathing." At her words, Elias felt something, like the land itself was listening again. Then they moved. Aylin lit the first torch and hurled it down into a wagon full of crates. The explosion ripped through the night, fire swallowing the camp in seconds. Men shouted, horses screamed. Gunfire erupted. Elias fired first, dropping a rider who tried to mount his horse. Tyan followed, her shots echoing sharp and sure. Morrison's men scattered, confusion spreading like wildfire. From the other side of the ridge, Nashdoiba's voice rose, a fierce, cutting cry that rolled across the canyon. "For the mountain!" Her war call sliced through the chaos. The 5 women descended like lightning, fire reflecting off their faces, fury lighting their eyes. Chenoa reloaded with trembling hands, every shot steady despite the fear shaking through her. Aylin darted through the smoke, knife flashing silver under the moon. Tyan kicked a burning barrel toward 2 men charging from the tents. It exploded, throwing them backward in a rain of sparks. Elias covered them, picking off riders as they tried to regroup. The world had narrowed to fire, gunpowder, and heartbeat. Morrison emerged from the smoke, revolver drawn, coat whipping around him like a storm cloud. His voice boomed above the gunfire. "Ward, you're playing outlaw now. For what? 5 savage whores who should have stayed dead?" Elias stepped from behind a wagon, rifle leveled. "You talk too much for a man who hides behind law papers." Morrison fired. The bullet grazed Elias's arm, tearing flesh. He ducked behind a crate, reloading fast. "You'll hang beside them," Morrison roared. "No one defies me and lives." Nastoiba's voice cut through the smoke behind him. "You're right, Judge. No one defies you and lives, until today." She fired. The shot hit Morrison's shoulder, spinning him. He staggered but didn't fall. His eyes burned with hate. "You think you can kill the law?" She advanced, gun steady. "No, we just came to bury it." Before she could fire again, one of Morrison's men tackled her from the side. They hit the ground hard, rolling. Elias aimed, but the smoke blinded him. Then Tyan came from behind, striking the man with the butt of her pistol. He dropped, and Nastoiba finished the job with a single shot. Morrison stumbled backward, clutching his shoulder, blood soaking his coat. He looked up toward the ridge, toward Elias. "You'll regret this, boy. The marshal rides for me. The law rides for me." Elias stepped closer, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "Then I guess the law's about to ride into hell." He fired. The bullet tore through Morrison's thigh, dropping him to his knees. His gun fell, sinking into the mud. Around them, the last of his men fled, leaving only smoke and fire and the sound of the river that wasn't there anymore. Morrison glared up, face twisted in rage and disbelief. "You think this changes anything? The world doesn't care about your savages or your ghosts." Kaya approached, her shawl soaked, her eyes bright with something ancient and unbroken. "The world forget," she said softly, "but the land remembers." She looked to Nastoiba. "Finish it." Nastoiba raised her pistol, but Elias put a hand on her arm. "No." Her eyes flashed. "He'll kill again." Elias nodded. "He will, if we kill him first. Let him face the marshal, face the truth he's been bearing. Let him choke on justice, not mercy." For a moment she stared at him, breathing hard. Then she lowered the gun. "Fine. But if the law fails again, I'll finish what we started." Elias helped her stand. Together they turned from Morrison, who knelt in the mud, cursing under his breath. Behind them, Tyan, Shanoa, and Aylin gathered the papers and gold coins from his wagon. Aylin tucked them carefully into her pouch, the proof of every stolen acre, every forged contract. Kaya threw handfuls of ash into the fire, whispering a final prayer. The flames roared higher, as if answering. Elias looked once more at Morrison, bound and broken. "You took everything from these women, from this land. Now you'll live long enough to watch it all come back." Morrison spat blood, sneering. "You'll die for this, Ward. You and your witches." Elias met his gaze, cold and steady. "Maybe, but not tonight." By sunrise, the canyon lay silent. The fire had died down to embers, the smoke curling gently toward the pale sky. Elias stood on the ridge beside Nastoiba. The others gathered around them. Below, Morrison was tied to his horse, hands bound, slumped but alive. "The marshal will find him by noon," Elias said. Nastoiba's eyes followed the horizon. "And when he does? Then maybe the law will remember what it's for." She didn't answer. The morning breeze caught her hair, carrying it across her face like a black flame. Tyan broke the silence. "What now?" Kay looked toward the mountain in the distance, where the first light touched its peaks. "We go home," she said simply, "if the mountain still allows it." Elias turned to them, his voice quiet but firm. "You're not alone anymore. Not while I'm breathing." Aylin smiled faintly. "Then you better keep breathing, rancher." He managed a grin, tired but real. "I'll do my best." As they started toward the rising sun, Elias looked back one last time. The valley below was scarred, blackened, but alive. The siege was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The sun rose slow and quiet over the valley, spilling gold light across the burned canyon. Smoke still hung in the air, turning everything soft and gray, like the land was finally exhaling after holding its breath too long. Elias Ward stood by the ridge, watching the marshals ride in from the east. Their badges caught the morning light like small mirrors. He didn't say a word as they reached the valley floor and found Morrison tied to his horse, blood crusted along his shoulder, pride shattered. Marshal Thompson, an old man with silver whiskers and eyes like weathered steel, looked up toward the ridge and spotted Elias. He gave a nod that carried both respect and weight. "Ward," he called out. "You the one who did this?" Elias didn't move for a moment. The rifle hung across his shoulder, his coat torn, face streaked with soot. "He did it to himself," he said finally. "I just stopped him before he hurt anyone else." The marshal studied him a moment longer, then turned his gaze toward Morrison. "We've been chasing this bastard for near 2 years," he said. "Didn't think justice would find him on its own." Kaya stepped forward, standing beside Elias. "Justice don't travel fast, Marshal," she said, "but it gets there when the land's ready." The marshal looked at her with quiet reverence. "Ma'am, after what I've heard about this man's dealings, the land's been ready a long damn time." He ordered his men to take Morrison away. The fallen judge didn't fight. He just stared at Elias and the women with eyes full of poison and disbelief, as if the world had betrayed him by letting them live. When the riders disappeared over the rise, silence filled the canyon again. The wind moved through the grass, whispering like an old friend. Elias turned to the women. "It's over," he said softly. Nashdoeba shook her head. "It's never over. The earth remembers everything that happens on it. Every lie, every drop of blood. The difference now is, it remembers us, too." They returned to the ridge later that day, to what was left of the cabin. Charred beams and ashes. The roof was gone, the walls half standing, but the ground still felt solid beneath their boots. Elias knelt, picking up a piece of burned wood. He turned it in his hand, the black soot smearing across his fingers. "My uncle built this place with his own hands," he murmured. "Guess I'll do the same." Kaya smiled faintly. "Then we'll help. The mountain owes you that much." And so they began. The next weeks were quiet, filled with the kind of work that didn't need word, only time, strength, and a shared will to live. Elias rebuilt the frame, hammering planks with the rhythm of a heartbeat. Tyan worked with him, rough hands blistered but steady. She laughed sometimes, short and sharp, at the way he cursed every time a nail bent. Chenoa planted seeds near the stream bed, the first green shoots sprouting within days. "Life finds a way," she'd say, smiling at the earth like it was an old friend. Aylin spent her days sorting the papers they'd taken from Morrison's wagon. Each night she'd spread them across the table, copying every signature, every forged seal. "If the law wants truth," she'd tell Elias, "we'll hand it to them wrapped in fire." Kaya became the quiet anchor of the house, tending the meals, humming songs from a language the wind seemed to understand. She'd sit outside at sunset, watching the horizon, whispering prayers not of vengeance, but of remembrance. And Nashdoeba, she never stopped moving. She helped with the beams, hunted deer, guarded the property. Yet every night, Elias found her by the gate, staring toward the mountains, the same mountains that had nearly killed her, the same ones she still called home. One evening, as the last light faded and the air turned cool, Elias sat by the new porch they'd built together. The house stood strong again, simpler, humbler, but alive. Smoke curled gently from the chimney, the smell of stew mixing with pine and rain. Nashdoiba came to sit beside him. Her hair glowed copper in the fading sun, her eyes soft for once. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, she said, "When I was a child, my father used to tell me a story about the mountain. He said it tested every soul that came near it. The ones who came to take left cursed. The ones who came to protect left changed." Elias looked at his hands, scarred and blackened from weeks of rebuilding. "Guess I've changed then." "You have," she said. "You stopped running from the ghosts behind you. Now you carry them forward instead." He nodded. "And you stopped hanging from ropes. Now you're the one cutting them." That made her smile, small, tired, but real. They sat there a while longer, listening to the crickets and the crackle of fire inside. The stars began to bloom overhead, scattered like silver dust. Somewhere far off, a coyote howled, long and lonely. Elias took a slow breath. "I keep thinking about something my uncle said once. He told me land isn't just bought with money, it's held with blood. I used to think he meant it as a warning. Now I think he meant it as a promise." Nashdoiba turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Blood doesn't always mean death, Elias. Sometimes it means belonging." By the end of the season, the valley had changed. The burned earth grew wildflowers. The creek that had run dry began to flow again after the spring rains. Travelers heading west spoke of a ranch that rose from the ashes, run by a strange family, one man and 5 Apache women who worked the land like it was sacred. No one dared trouble them. Some said the ground itself cursed any man who tried. But the people who came seeking kindness always found it. There was always water, always a place by the fire, and always a story told under the stars. Elias called the place Na'uta, the circle of life. And when the marshal rode through months later, he stopped long enough to leave a document on the table, a deed recognizing the land under Elias's name and theirs. Justice comes late, he told them, but it comes. Elias watched him ride off, the dust rising behind the horse's hooves, and felt something he hadn't in years: peace. That night, the six of them gathered outside. A full moon hung over the mountain, silvering the world in light. They sat around the fire, faces warm, shadows long. Kaya passed around a cup of coffee, strong and bitter. Tyan laughed at something Chenoa said. Aylin hummed an old song, one she'd promised never to forget. Nashto Iba leaned against the fence, watching the flames dance. Elias looked at them all, and something deep inside him stirred, a gratitude that felt older than words. I thought I inherited a cabin, he said quietly, but I inherited something better. I inherited all of you. Kaya smiled, her eyes glistening. And we inherited a future. The fire cracked, sending sparks into the sky like tiny stars escaping gravity. The wind shifted through the grass, carrying voices that sounded like laughter, like memory, like freedom. Elias stayed up long after the others had gone inside. The night was quiet except for the creak of wood and the whisper of the mountain. He felt the land breathing again, alive, forgiving. He thought about everything that had happened: the ropes, the fire, the fight, the rebuilding. Every nail, every scar had stitched him into the soil of this place. He wasn't just a man living on land anymore. He was part of it. He looked toward the horizon, where the moonlight touched the peaks, and spoke softly to no one and everyone at once. Maybe that's what it means to start over, he said. Not to forget what was done, but to build something that remembers. He paused, eyes on the fire, the embers glowing like tiny hearts refusing to die out. Tell me, he said finally, voice almost a whisper meant for whoever was listening. What would you have done if you'd found them hanging there that morning? Would you have cut the ropes or ridden away? He let the question hang in the wind, swallowed by the vast, endless silence of the West. And so the story ends, not with vengeance, but with remembrance. Not with fire, but with the earth learning how to breathe again.